A man locks his 3-year-old daughter in the barn and walks away. She cries in the dark, hugging her teddy bear. Suddenly, a white horse breaks through the fence and runs to the door. But first, if you love animals as much as we do, make sure to subscribe to our channel so you won't miss any heart-touching stories. Thanks a lot. Now let's get back to our story. Morning fog rolled across the vast Kentucky bluegrass, shrouding Thornfield Acres in a pearly veil that softened the edges of the white fences and muffled the distant lowing of cattle. The prestigious horse farm sat nestled in the gentle hills like a postcard of rural perfection. Manicured paddocks, gleaming stables, and a colonial-style mansion crowning the property's highest point. In the pale dawn light, dew-laden spiderwebs stretched between fence posts glistened like strings of diamonds, fragile and temporary against the farm's air of permanent prosperity. Jake Mitchell pulled his truck through the ornate iron gates, gravel crunching beneath the tires. At 26, he'd worked with horses across 3 states, but never at a place this immaculate. His new position as assistant trainer had come unexpectedly. The previous man had quit without notice, and the farm manager had hired Jake with minimal questions, seeming more concerned with filling the position quickly than with Jake's qualifications. "Keep to yourself and do your job well," Martha, the stern-faced housekeeper, had told him during his brief orientation. "Mr. Thornfield values efficiency and discretion above all else." Jake hadn't even met the owner yet. Richard Thornfield was something of a local legend, a 3rd-generation horseman whose breeding program had produced multiple Kentucky Derby contenders. But in the past year, he'd become reclusive, rarely seen in town or at races. Local gossip attributed his withdrawal to the sudden passing of his wife in a riding accident, though details were scarce and employees at Thornfield Acres didn't discuss. The morning routine was already underway as Jake parked near the main stable. Grooms moved methodically between stalls, the rhythmic sounds of horses munching hay and the occasional soft whicker creating a peaceful backdrop to the work. Jake nodded to a few workers who glanced his way, receiving only brief acknowledgments in return. "You're looking after the North Barn today," said Roy, the head trainer, approaching with a clipboard. A weathered man in his 60s with leathery skin and perpetually narrowed eyes, Roy spoke with the clipped efficiency of someone who considered words a limited resource. "Focus on spirit. He's been off his feed." Jake followed Roy's gaze toward the largest paddock, where a white horse stood apart from the others. Even at a distance, there was something regal about the animal. A thoroughbred with the elegant lines of a champion, though clearly past his prime. His coat gleamed like fresh snow in the morning light, but he held his head low, ears flicking restlessly. "Spirit special," Roy continued, his voice softening slightly. "Been with the Thornfield family nearly 18 years. Used to be Mr. Thornfield's wife's personal mount, show winner, parade horse, the works." "He looks upset," Jake observed, watching the animal pace along the fence line. Roy's expression closed. "Just old age. Make sure he gets his supplements and exercise. Don't bother with the rest." The rest. Jake wanted to ask what that meant, but Roy had already turned away, calling orders to a young groom who dropped a water bucket. Later that morning, Jake led Spirit from the paddock for grooming. The horse came willingly enough, but his attention remained fixed somewhere beyond Jake's shoulder, dark eyes alert and nostrils flaring periodically. During grooming, Spirit stood unnaturally still, except for occasional trembling, his muscles, and tense under Jake's brush. "Easy, boy," Jake murmured, running a hand down the horse's neck. "What's got you so worked up?" As Jake moved around to Spirit's other side, he noticed how the horse's gaze remained locked in one direction, toward a weathered barn standing apart from the other buildings. Unlike the pristine white stables and equipment sheds, this structure was older, with faded red paint and a roofline that sagged slightly in the middle. It stood partially obscured by a cluster of old oak trees, their shadows casting irregular patterns across its walls. "That's the old storage barn," said a voice behind him. Jake turned to find a young woman carrying a bucket of feed. She looked about 20, with freckles scattered across her nose and strawberry blonde hair pulled into a practical braid. "I'm Lily," she offered. "I've been here 2 years. Jake started Monday." Lily glanced around nervously before stepping closer. "That barn's off limits. Mr. Thornfield's orders says it's not structurally sound." She lowered her voice. "Spirit's been acting strange about it for weeks now. Used to be the sweetest horse on the property. Now he barely eats, doesn't sleep right. Keeps trying to get to that barn." "What's in there?" "Farm equipment, supposedly." Lily shrugged. "Nobody goes in except Mr. Thornfield. It's always locked." She straightened suddenly, her expression shifting. "Anyway, you should get Spirit back to his stall. Roy doesn't like the horses out too long." She hurried away, and Jake watched her go with a frown. Something in her manner, the way her eyes had darted toward the main house before she spoke, left him unsettled. Over the next few days, Jake observed Spirit with growing concern. The horse's behavior worsened. He refused most of his feed, leaving his grain untouched. During exercise, he repeatedly veered toward the old barn, becoming agitated when Jake redirected him. At night, stable hands reported hearing him kicking at his stall door. On Jake's 5th day, he arrived early to find Roy and 2 grooms struggling to control Spirit, who had somehow escaped his stall and was found circling the old barn, snorting and pawing at the ground near its padlocked door. "Damn beast is losing his mind," Roy muttered, wiping sweat from his brow after they'd finally returned Spirit to his stall. "Mr. Thornfield won't hear of selling him, though. Says he promised Mrs. Thornfield he'd keep the horse until natural end of life." "Has a vet checked him?" Jake asked. "Of course," Roy snapped. "Nothing physically wrong, just old." But Jake wasn't convinced. That afternoon, while exercising Spirit on a lead line, he deliberately walked closer to the old barn than usual. The horse's reaction was immediate. Ears pricked forward, nostrils flaring, muscles tensing with sudden energy. As they passed the building, Jake noticed fresh gouges in the wooden door, splinters broken away at shoulder height for a horse. Spirit had been trying to get in, and with considerable force. At the end of his shift, Jake lingered, waiting until the other workers had departed before circling back to examine the barn more closely. The padlock on the door was heavy and new, contrasting with the building's weathered appearance. The windows were boarded from the inside. At the base of the door, Jake discovered something odd. Tendrils of fresh hay poking out from underneath, as though someone had recently opened and closed the door, inadvertently catching strands of hay in the process. As he leaned closer to examine this, he heard the crunch of tires on gravel. Standing quickly, Jake moved behind a nearby oak tree just as a black SUV pulled up. Richard Thornfield himself stepped out, a tall, imposing figure in pressed khakis and a button-down shirt despite the late hour. Though in his mid-50s, he moved with the deliberate precision of a much older man, his silver-streaked hair and deep-set eyes giving him a severe appearance. Jake watched as Thornfield approached the barn, glancing around before unlocking the heavy padlock. He disappeared inside for several minutes before emerging with what looked like an empty water pitcher and a small paper bag. After carefully securing the lock once more, Thornfield returned to his vehicle and drove toward the main house. The exchange took less than 10 minutes, but it left Jake profoundly uneasy. Why would the owner of a sprawling horse farm need to personally deliver water to a supposedly empty storage barn? And why the secrecy, the nervous glances, the heavy lock that seemed designed to keep something in rather than keeping trespassers out? As Jake walked back to his truck, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the rolling hills of Thornfield Acres. From the main stable came a sound that raised the hair on the back of his neck. Spirit's high, thin whinny, more distress than greeting echoing in the gathering dusk like a warning. On impulse, Jake took a detour past Spirit's stall. The white horse stood rigidly alert, head high, ears swiveling toward the old barn. When he saw Jake, Spirit pawed the ground frantically, tossing his head. "What is it, boy?" Jake whispered, reaching out to stroke the horse's neck. "What are you trying to tell me?" In response, Spirit turned to face the direction of the barn, as though pointing, before letting out another of those eerie, strained whinnies. That night, Jake couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about Spirit's desperate behavior, about Thornfield's furtive movements, about the fresh hay beneath a supposedly unused barn door. There was something wrong at Thornfield Acres, something that went beyond a reclusive owner and an aging horse's peculiar fixation. The following morning dawned chilly and clear. Jake arrived earlier than usual, parking his truck where he could observe the old barn. As the eastern sky brightened from navy to pale blue, he saw Thornfield's SUV approach the structure once more. This time, the owner emerged carrying a tray, covered with a cloth napkin. After his brief visit inside, he returned with the same tray, now empty, and drove back to the main house. Jake waited another 15 minutes before approaching Spirit's stall. The white horse was agitated, pacing in tight circles, stopping occasionally to stare in the direction of the barn. When Jake opened the stall door, Spirit immediately pushed past him and trotted toward the barn, stopping only when he reached the locked door. There, he began to paw insistently at the ground, digging shallow trenches in the dirt with his hooves. Kneeling beside one of these fresh depressions, Jake noticed something that made his breath catch. A small, worn, stuffed animal, half buried, in the mud. It was a little pink rabbit, dirty and damp, one ear partially torn away. It looked like a child's toy. As Jake stared at the bedraggled rabbit, everything suddenly felt wrong. Spirit's obsession, Thornfield's secrecy, the locked barn that no one was permitted to enter. His fingers closed around the toy, and in that moment, he made a decision. Whatever was happening at Thornfield Acres, he couldn't ignore it any longer. That evening, Jake arrived at his small rental apartment with the muddy pink rabbit tucked inside his jacket. Under the harsh kitchen light, he examined it carefully. The stuffed toy was well loved, fabric worn thin in places, stitches reinforced multiple times, one plastic eye slightly looser than the other. This wasn't something abandoned or forgotten. It bore the marks of a cherished possession. Jake placed the rabbit on his kitchen counter and paced the cramped space, mind racing. He needed more information before jumping to conclusions, but his instincts had rarely led him astray when it came to trouble. After several minutes of deliberation, he pulled out his phone and dialed his sister, a social worker in Louisville. "Sarah, it's Jake. I need to ask you something. Hypothetical." After explaining his observations, carefully framing them as a what-if scenario, he listened to his sister's measured response. "If you genuinely suspect a child might be in danger, you need to report it," she said firmly. "But Jake, be absolutely certain before making accusations against someone like Richard Thornfield. He's powerful in Kentucky horse country. Without concrete evidence, it could be your word against his." Jake ran a hand through his hair. What would count as evidence? Documentation, photos, recordings, direct observation of the child, or clear signs of mistreatment. But Jake, her voice softened. "Be careful. If there is a child being harmed, the person responsible is dangerous. Don't put yourself at risk." The conversation left Jake more unsettled than before. He set his alarm for 4:30 a.m., determined to arrive at the farm before anyone else. Dawn was just a pale suggestion on the horizon when Jake parked his truck behind a copse of trees. A quarter-mile from the main entrance, the farm was silent as he made his way along the perimeter fence, careful to avoid the security cameras he'd noticed positioned around the more valuable stable areas. The old barn, being supposedly unused, had fewer security measures. The heavy, Padlock still secured the main door, but Jake had noticed a small side entrance partially hidden by overgrown bushes. This door was secured with a simpler lock, which he examined in the beam of his flashlight. Years of working on farms had taught him various practical skills, including how to pick basic locks. Within minutes, he was inside. The air in the barn was stale and heavy with the smell of hay, dust, and something else, a faint human scent that didn't belong in an unused building. Jake swept his flashlight beam across the interior, revealing farming equipment covered in tarps, stacked hay bales, and various storage containers. Nothing immediately suspicious. Moving deeper into the structure, he noticed a section of the barn had been partitioned off with a hastily constructed wall. A small door was set into this wall, secured with another padlock. Jake approached it cautiously, ear pressed against the rough wood. Silence. Then, so faint he might have imagined it a soft shuffling sound, like someone's small shifting position. Jake's heart began to pound. He directed his flashlight toward the crack beneath the door and saw a thin blanket pushed against it, presumably to block light from entering or escaping. Making a quick decision, he retrieved a pair of wire cutters from a nearby toolbox and began working on the padlock. The lock gave way with a snap that sounded impossibly loud in the quiet barn. Jake winced, frozen in place as he listened for any reaction. Nothing. Slowly, he pushed the door open. The flashlight beam revealed a small space, perhaps 8 feet square, with a dirt floor partially covered by a threadbare rug. A child-sized mattress lay in one corner, topped with a thin blanket. A plastic bucket sat in another corner, alongside a half-empty water bottle and a small plate containing the remnants of what looked like a sandwich. On the mattress lay a small figure, curled into a tight ball, face hidden against drawn-up knees. "Hello?" Jake whispered, hardly able to breathe. The child didn't move or respond, but Jake could see the slight rise and fall of breathing. Taking a step forward, his foot struck something that rolled across the floor, a toy car with one wheel missing. The sound finally provoked a reaction. The child's head lifted slightly, revealing a face so pale and drawn that Jake had to suppress a gasp. It was a boy, perhaps 6 or 7 years old, with tangled blonde hair and hollow cheeks. His eyes, when they opened, were an intense blue that seemed unnaturally bright against his pallor. He stared at Jake without surprise or fear, as though too exhausted for either emotion. "My name is Jake," he said softly, crouching to appear less threatening. "I'm here to help. Can you tell me your name?" The boy remained silent, watching Jake with that unnerving, empty stare. "Are you hurt? Can you stand up?" After a long moment, the boy shook his head slightly, not a refusal, but a gesture of confusion or disbelief. "I'm going to get you out of here," Jake promised, reaching slowly toward the child. The boy flinched away, pressing himself against the wall. Jake immediately withdrew his hand. "It's okay. I won't touch you if you don't want me to, but we need to leave. Can you walk?" The child's gaze shifted toward the open door, then back to Jake. With painful slowness, he uncurled his body and attempted to stand. Jake noticed his clothes, a t-shirt and sweatpants several sizes too large, were relatively clean but hung from his small frame. The boy's legs trembled as he put weight on them, and he swayed dangerously. On instinct, Jake reached out to steady him. This time, the boy didn't pull away, though his entire body went rigid at the contact. "I'm going to pick you up, okay? Just to get you outside, then we'll figure out what to do next." Without waiting for a response Jake didn't expect to receive, he carefully lifted the child. The boy was terrifyingly light, bones prominent beneath Jake's hands. As Jake turned to leave, the child suddenly reached toward the mattress, one small hand opening and closing in a grabbing motion. "What is it? What do you need?" Following the boy's gaze, Jake spotted a small wooden horse figurine, partially hidden beneath the pillow. He retrieved it, placing it in the boy's palm, which immediately closed around it with surprising strength. "Let's go," Jake whispered. The trek back through the barn seemed endless, each creak of the old floorboards amplified by fear. The boy remained completely silent in Jake's arms, but his eyes darted constantly, taking in everything with the hypervigilance of someone accustomed to threat. When they finally reached the side door, Jake paused, listening for any sign they'd been discovered. The farm was still quiet, the eastern sky just beginning to lighten with impending dawn. Jake stepped outside, pulling the door almost closed. Behind them, he'd need to come back later to erase any evidence of their entry, but first he had to get the boy to safety. As they emerged from the shadow of the barn, a soft, nickering sound froze them both in place. Spirit stood just beyond the barn's corner, having somehow escaped his stall again. The white horse approached slowly, ears pricked forward, nostrils flaring as he caught the boy's scent. To Jake's astonishment, the child in his arms suddenly showed animation, stretching one thin arm toward the horse with desperate intensity. Spirit moved closer until his velvet muzzle touched the boy's outstretched fingers. The horse blew softly against the child's palm, and for the briefest moment, something like a smile ghosted across the boy's gaunt face. The connection between them was palpable, something beyond normal human-animal interaction. Jake stood, transfixed, watching as Spirit gently nuzzled the boy's arm, careful despite his size and strength. The horse's eyes, usually anxious and wild lately, were calm now, focused entirely on the child. "You know each other," Jake whispered, the final piece clicking into place. "That's why you've been trying to get to the barn. You knew he was in there." Spirit snorted softly, as if in confirmation. "We have to go," Jake said, reluctantly breaking the moment. "It's not safe here." As if understanding, Spirit stepped back, allowing Jake to pass. With one last look at the horse, Jake carried the boy toward the trees where he'd left his truck, moving as quickly as he dared through the dewy grass. Behind them, Spirit remained stationed like a sentinel, his white coat gleaming in the strengthening dawn light. Jake had just reached his truck when he heard an engine in the distance. Someone arriving earlier than expected. With practiced efficiency, he secured the boy in the passenger seat and slid behind the wheel. As he started the engine, he glanced back toward the barn. Spirit had vanished, presumably returning to his stall, but the impression of the horse's watchful presence lingered. "We're going somewhere safe," Jake told the boy, who sat unnaturally still, the wooden horse clutched in both hands. "Can you tell me your name now?" For a long moment, silence filled the truck. Then, so quietly, Jake almost missed it. "Noah." "Noah," Jake repeated gently. "That's a good name. I'm gonna call someone who can help us, okay?" The boy, Noah, didn't respond, his attention fixed on the wooden horse in his hands, fingers tracing its carved mane and tail with ritualistic precision. Jake pulled onto the main road, glancing frequently in his rearview mirror, half expecting to see Thornfield's black SUV in pursuit. Instead, the road remained empty, the Kentucky countryside peaceful in the early morning light. They'd made it out unseen, but Jake knew this was just the beginning of whatever storm was coming. 20 minutes later, they arrived at Mill Creek Hospital, the nearest medical facility with a pediatric unit. Jake had called ahead, using Sarah's name as a connection to expedite their arrival. A nurse was waiting at the emergency entrance, her professional demeanor faltering only slightly at the sight of Noah's condition. "I found him locked in a barn at Thornfield Acres," Jake explained as they rushed Noah into an examination room. "I'm pretty sure he's Richard Thornfield's son, though I didn't know he had one. I've only worked there a week." "We'll need to contact the authorities," the nurse said, already taking Noah's vital signs while a doctor was paged. "I know, but please make sure he's protected. Thornfield is powerful around here." The nurse's expression hardened. "This child's safety is our only concern, sir. I assure you of that." As medical personnel surrounded Noah, Jake stepped back. Suddenly, Uncertain of his place in this unfolding drama, the boy's eyes sought him out, wide with panic as strangers touched him and attached monitoring equipment. "I'll stay right here," Jake promised, moving to where Noah could see him clearly. "I'm not leaving." Hours blurred together as Noah was examined, blood drawn, scans taken. Jake answered endless questions from hospital staff, then police officers, then Child Protective Services. He repeated his observations, described finding the stuffed rabbit, detailed Spirit's behavior and his own investigation. Officials documented everything. Photographed the wooden horse Noah refused to relinquish and took Jake's statement multiple times. By mid-afternoon, Jake sat slumped in a chair beside Noah's hospital bed, exhausted but unwilling to leave. The boy had finally fallen asleep, sedated to allow doctors to treat his dehydration and malnutrition without causing further distress. In sleep, Noah's face lost some of its haunting emptiness, reverting to something closer to ordinary childhood. Soft knock at the door roused Jake from his half-doze. Sarah stood in the doorway, her professional composure betrayed by the worry in her eyes. "How is he?" she asked, approaching the bed. "Physically, they think he'll recover. Emotionally," Jake shook his head. "They don't know yet. He's barely spoken." Sarah studied the sleeping child. "The police have gone to Thornfield Acres with a search warrant. They're bringing in state investigators since the local police have connections to the family." "What happens to Noah now?" "He'll stay here until he's stabilized, then transferred to a specialized facility for evaluation and care." Sarah squeezed Jake's shoulder. "You did the right thing bringing him here directly." "I wish I'd figured it out sooner." Jake's voice cracked slightly. "He was right there all this time, and the horse knew. Spirit knew and was trying to tell anyone who would listen." Sarah followed his gaze to the wooden horse still clutched in Noah's small hand. "Animals sense things we miss sometimes. They don't overthink or rationalize away what's right in front of them. Spirit wouldn't leave the barn alone, kept trying to break down the door. Everyone thought he was just old and confused, but he knew." Jake rubbed his eyes. "I keep wondering how long Noah was in there, and why. What kind of father locks his child away like that?" "The investigation will answer those questions," Sarah said firmly. "For now, focus on the fact that Noah is safe." "You made that happen." Jake nodded, though guilt still gnawed at him. He should have acted sooner, trusted his instincts from the first day when he noticed Spirit's strange behavior. A nurse entered with a tray of supplies, checking Noah's IV and vital signs with practiced efficiency. "Has anyone contacted his mother?" Jake asked, suddenly. "Maybe she doesn't know. Mrs. Thornfield passed away last year," Sarah replied quietly. "Car accident, according to public records. The investigating team is looking into all family connections. If there are relatives who can provide appropriate care, they'll be contacted." Jake remembered the gossip about Thornfield's wife dying in a riding accident. Another lie, apparently. He wondered how many more would be uncovered before this was over. What about Thornfield himself? Has he been arrested? Sarah's expression tightened. "Not yet. He wasn't at the property when police arrived. They've issued an alert." The implication hung heavy in the air. Thornfield was running from justice, from accountability, from the consequences of whatever twisted scenario he'd created in that locked barn. Noah stirred slightly in his sleep, fingers tightening around the wooden horse. Jake leaned forward, instinctively placing a reassuring hand on the boy's thin arm. To his surprise, Noah settled almost immediately at his touch, his breathing evening out once more. "You should get some rest," Sarah suggested. "I can stay with him for a while." Jake shook his head. "I promised I wouldn't leave." As evening settled over the hospital, Jake remained beside Noah's bed, watching the slow rise and fall of the boy's chest. Outside the guarded room, police officers and social workers conferred in hushed tones. News vans had begun to gather in the parking lot, the first ripples of what would soon become a media tsunami once the story broke. In that quiet moment, Jake thought of Spirit, wondering if the horse was still pacing his stall, still trying to reach the boy who was no longer there. Somehow, he felt certain the animal knew Noah was safe now. Perhaps that knowledge would finally allow the old horse to rest. Noah's fingers uncurled slightly in sleep, revealing a small corner of the wooden carving, a white horse in mid-stride, mane flowing, head high. An exact miniature of Spirit, carved with surprising skill and detail, a talisman that had kept the boy connected to his only ally during his darkest hours. Jake settled deeper into his chair, prepared for the long night ahead. The storm was just beginning, but for now, in this sterile hospital room, Noah slept peacefully, free from his prison, the carved horse standing guard in his dreams. By morning, the story had erupted. Local news vans clustered around the hospital entrance, reporters jostling for position as police officers maintained a protective perimeter. Inside Noah's room, Jake scrolled through headlines on his phone. While the boy slept, heir to Kentucky horse fortune found imprisoned on family estate. Thornfield manhunt continues as child abuse allegations shock community. White stallion leads worker to imprisoned boy. The incredible rescue at Thornfield. Acres. Jake set the phone aside, rubbing his gritty eyes. He hadn't slept more than a few minutes at a stretch all night, unwilling to leave Noah alone in an unfamiliar place. The boy had woken twice. Once in silent terror from a nightmare, the second time calmly asking in a whisper for water. Both times, he'd immediately checked for the wooden horse figure, clutching it like a lifeline. A gentle knock preceded Dr. Eleanor Chen's entrance. The pediatrician's kind eyes crinkled above her surgical mask as she approached Noah's bed. "How's our patient this morning?" she asked softly. "Still sleeping," Jake replied. He had some water around 3 a.m., then went back to sleep. Dr. Chen nodded, checking Noah's vitals on the monitor. "That's good. His body needs rest to recover. His blood work shows significant vitamin deficiencies, and he's severely underweight. But there are no acute medical emergencies. Physically, he'll heal with proper nutrition and care." The unspoken concern hung between them. Physical recovery was just the beginning of Noah's journey. "Has he spoken to you about what happened?" Dr. Chen asked, adjusting Noah's IV. Jake shook his head. "Barely. Just his name and asking for water. He doesn't act like a typical kid. More like he's waiting for the next bad thing to happen." "That's a common trauma response," Dr. Chen said gently. "Children who've experienced prolonged abuse or neglect often develop hypervigilance. They're constantly scanning for threats, conserving emotional energy, sometimes appearing emotionally flat when they're actually in a state of constant alertness." Jake glanced at Noah's thin face, peaceful in sleep, yet still bearing the subtle tension of someone who couldn't fully relax. "How long will that last?" "Recovery isn't linear," she replied. "With proper treatment, support, and a stable environment, children can make remarkable progress. But the trauma will always be part of his story." As they spoke, Noah's eyelids fluttered, then opened. His gaze immediately found Jake, then darted to Dr. Chen, his body tensing visibly. "Good morning, Noah," Dr. Chen said, keeping her distance. "I'm Dr. Chen. I'm here to help you feel better. Is it okay if I check your arm where the IV is?" Noah looked to Jake, seeking reassurance. "It's okay, Jake. Confirmed. Dr. Chen is helping you get stronger." After a moment's hesitation, Noah extended his arm slightly, though his other hand maintained its grip on the wooden horse. "Thank you," Dr. Chen smiled, gently examining the IV site. "You're being very brave." Noah watched her every movement with intense focus, but remained cooperative. When she finished, he immediately withdrew his arm, tucking it close to his body. "Would you like some breakfast?" Dr. Chen asked. "The kitchen can make pancakes, eggs, or oatmeal." Noah's eyes widened slightly at the options, confusion evident in his expression. "Maybe just some toast to start," Jake suggested, sensing Noah's overwhelm. "And apple juice." Noah gave a tiny nod, and Dr. Chen made a note. "I'll have that brought in. A child psychologist will also visit later today, Noah. Her name is Dr. Morales, and she just wants to talk with you. Nothing scary." After the doctor left, Noah sat silently, his gaze drifting repeatedly to the window. Jake followed his line of sight to the slice of blue sky visible between the blinds. "Would you like me to open those?" Jake asked. "So you can see outside?" Another small nod. Jake adjusted the blinds, allowing sunlight to stream into the sterile room. Noah's face relaxed fractionally as he stared at the patch of sky. "Spirit, that's the white horse, used to let me see the sky." The words, spoken in a soft, raspy voice, startled Jake so much he nearly dropped the blind cord. It was the most Noah had said at once since his rescue. "How did Spirit do that?" Jake asked carefully, returning to his chair. Noah's fingers traced the wooden horse's carved mane. "He would stand by the window. Mr. Richard didn't board up the high one because he thought I couldn't reach. But when Spirit came, I could climb on his back and see the sky." A shadow crossed his face. "But Mr. Richard caught us. He was very angry. That's when he moved me to the dark place." Jake's chest tightened at the matter-of-fact way Noah related this cruelty. "The dark place was the barn where I found you?" Noah nodded. "Before, I was in the old house, the one past the trees. It had a window, but after Spirit helped me see the sky, Mr. Richard said I needed discipline." His voice dropped to a whisper. "He said my mother was undisciplined, and that's why she left us." Jake struggled to keep his expression neutral, despite the rage building inside him. "Noah, do you know how long you were in the barn?" The boy's brow furrowed in concentration. "Many cold times and many hot times. I counted sunrises when I could see light under the door. I made marks." He held up his wooden horse, turning it to show tiny scratches on its belly, dozens of them grouped in sets of 5. "Spirit gave me this. He pushed it through the window before the dark place." A nurse arrived with Noah's breakfast, interrupting their conversation. Jake helped arrange the tray, noting how Noah's hand trembled as he reached for the toast. The boy took a small, cautious bite, chewing with deliberate slowness. "It's okay to eat," Jake reassured him. "There's plenty more. If you want it?" Noah nodded, but continued his methodical approach to the meal, as if accustomed to making food last. Jake recognized the behavior from his sister's descriptions of children who'd experienced food insecurity, the careful rationing, the hidden anxiety about when the next meal might come. As Noah ate, Jake's phone vibrated with a text from Sarah. "Police have secured Thornfield property, found documents, need to talk ASAP." "Noah, I need to step outside for just a minute to talk to my sister," Jake explained. "Is that okay? The nurse will stay with you, and I'll be right outside the door." Fear flashed across Noah's face, but he gave a small nod, clutching the wooden horse tighter. In the hallway, Sarah waited with a police detective Jake had met the previous day, Detective Ramirez. Both wore grim expressions. "What's happening?" Jake asked. "We found Thornfield's journals," Sarah said, "and his wife's death certificate. The official cause was a car accident, but there are inconsistencies in the reports. The investigating officers at the time had connections to Thornfield's family." Detective Ramirez nodded. "We're reopening that investigation. But more importantly for now, we've discovered Noah's birth certificate and medical records. His full name is Noah Christopher Thornfield. He's 7 years old and has been officially homeschooled for the past 3 years, though there's no evidence of actual education taking place." "What about other family?" Jake asked. "Grandparents, aunts, or uncles?" Sarah shook her head. "Richard Thornfield was an only child. His parents are deceased. Catherine Thornfield, Noah's mother, has a sister in California. We're trying to contact her. And Thornfield himself? Still at large, Detective Ramirez replied. But we've frozen his accounts and issued alerts nationwide. It's just a matter of time. Jake ran a hand through his hair. Those journals, did they explain why? Why he'd lock up his own son? Sarah and the detective exchanged glances. It appears Richard Thornfield suffered from severe paranoia and delusional thinking following his wife's death, Sarah said carefully. The journals document his belief that Noah possessed some sort of dangerous intuition inherited from his mother. He claimed Noah could see through people and needed to be isolated for the protection of society until this ability could be trained out of him. Jesus, Jake whispered. There's more, Detective Ramirez added. Thornfield wrote extensively about the White Horse spirit. He believed the animal was somehow working against him, trying to corrupt Noah. He described plans to have the horse put down, but wrote that he'd promised his wife never to harm the animal. Spirit saved Noah, Jake said firmly. The horse knew something was wrong and tried to tell anyone who would listen. When no one understood, he tried to help Noah himself. Detective Ramirez looked skeptical but nodded. Whatever the case, the horse's behavior led you to investigate, and that saved the boy. Speaking of which, how is he doing this morning? He's talking more, Jake reported. He mentioned being kept somewhere else before the barn, an old house on the property, and he's been counting days using marks on that wooden horse carving. Sarah's expression softened. That's actually a good sign. He's processing time and maintaining some sense of agency despite his circumstances. The forensic team will search for the other location, Detective Ramirez said. And we'll need to speak with Noah when the psychologist says he's ready. He hesitated. We've also organized for someone to check on the horse, make sure it's being properly cared for while the property is under investigation. Jake nodded gratefully. Thank you. I think Noah would want to know Spirit is okay. When Jake returned to the room, Noah had finished his toast and half the apple juice. The boy looked up, relief visible in his eyes at Jake's return. The police are taking good care of Spirit, Jake told him, settling back into his chair. And they're trying to find your aunt, your mum's sister. Did you know you have an aunt? Noah's eyes widened slightly. Aunt Maggie, with the red hair. I don't know yet, Jake admitted, but they're looking for her. Mr. Richard said she went away forever, like Mom. Noah's voice dropped to a whisper. He said everyone always leaves. Jake's heart ached at the resignation in the child's tone. Noah, what happened to you wasn't normal or okay. Mr. Richard was wrong to lock you up, and wrong about a lot of other things too. Noah studied Jake's face, as if searching for deception. Why did you look for me? No one else did. The question, simple yet devastating, left Jake momentarily speechless. How could he explain that most people had no idea Noah existed? That Thornfield had apparently hidden his son's very existence from the community? Spirit showed me something was wrong, Jake finally said. He kept trying to get to the barn, and I realized he was trying to help you. So I started watching and asking questions. Spirit is my friend, Noah said with unexpected firmness. He used to visit my window before the dark place. He would stand really still so I could reach his mane through the bars. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. His nose is soft. Jake smiled back, encouraged by this small animation. He's a beautiful horse. Very smart. Can I see him again? Noah asked, the question hanging in the air like a fragile hope. Before Jake could answer, Dr. Morales, the child psychologist, arrived. She was a woman in her 50s with silver-streaked black hair and a gentle demeanor that immediately put Jake at ease. Hello, Noah, she said, pulling a chair to a respectful distance from the bed. I'm Dr. Morales. I'd like to talk with you. For a little while, if that's okay. Noah glanced at Jake, who nodded encouragingly. "It's okay. I can stay or step out, whatever makes you most comfortable." "Stay," Noah whispered, his fingers tightening around the wooden horse. The session that followed was both gentle and skillful. Dr. Morales asked simple questions about Noah's immediate needs and feelings, carefully avoiding pressing him for details about his captivity. She brought a drawing pad and colored pencils, inviting Noah to draw whatever he wished while they talked. Noah hesitated at first, but eventually began to sketch with surprising precision for a 7-year-old. His picture took shape slowly, a white horse standing beside a small figure with a simplified house and barn in the background. The sky he drew was vast and blue, occupying nearly half the page. "That's a wonderful drawing," Dr. Morales commented. "Is that Spirit?" Noah nodded, adding careful details to the horse's mane. "And is that you beside him?" Another nod. "You've made the sky very big and beautiful." Noah paused, pencil hovering over the paper. "Spirit helped me see it." The session continued for nearly an hour, Dr. Morales expertly creating a safe space for Noah to express himself without pressure. By the end, the boy had completed 3 drawings, all featuring Spirit, and had spoken more than he had since arriving at the hospital. Though he still flinched at sudden movements and kept the wooden horse within reach at all times, there were glimpses of a normal child beneath the layers of trauma. After Dr. Morales left, promising to return tomorrow, Noah seemed exhausted but somehow lighter. He ate more of his lunch than breakfast and even asked Jake about the other horses at Thornfield Acres. Late that afternoon, Sarah returned with news. "We've located Margaret Reynolds, Catherine Thornfield's sister. She's flying in from San Francisco tomorrow morning." Noah remembered her, Jake said. "He called her Aunt Maggie with the red hair." Sarah smiled. "That's her. According to her initial statement, she lost contact with Catherine and Noah about 3 years ago. Richard Thornfield told her they wanted no further contact with her. After an argument, she tried reaching out multiple times, but eventually believed they'd cut ties deliberately." Sarah lowered her voice. She had no idea Catherine had died or that Noah was in danger. "What happens when she arrives?" "There will be a formal assessment to determine if she's a suitable guardian, given that she's Noah's closest living relative, and there are no red flags in her background. It's likely he'll eventually be placed with her, assuming she's willing and able to provide for his needs." Sarah glanced toward Noah, who had fallen asleep clutching his drawing pad. "But the transition will be gradual. He'll need specialized care for some time." Jake nodded, watching the steady rise and fall of Noah's chest. In sleep, the boy looked even younger, the worry lines on his forehead smoothed away. He asked if he could see Spirit again. Sarah considered this. It might actually be therapeutic. Animals can be incredible supports for traumatized children. They offer unconditional acceptance without the complex expectations of human relationships. She smiled slightly. Plus, Spirit's already proven himself to be quite the advocate for Noah. The following day brought a whirlwind of activity. Noah met with Dr. Morales again, participated in a brief, carefully conducted interview with Detective Ramirez, and was visited by a physical therapist who assessed his mobility and strength. Though still withdrawn with new people, he was speaking more freely with Jake and had begun asking questions, hesitantly at first, then with growing curiosity as he realized answers were freely given. "Where will I go when I leave the hospital?" he asked, as Jake helped him build a simple puzzle brought by a hospital volunteer. "The doctors want to make sure you're strong enough first," Jake explained. "Then there are some special doctors who help kids who've had difficult experiences. They'll work with you for a little while." He hesitated, unsure how much to share about Maggie Reynolds. "Your Aunt Maggie is coming to see you today. Do you remember her?" Noah's hands stilled on the puzzle pieces. "She used to sing me songs, and she has a cat named Button." "That sounds like her," Jake smiled. She's been looking for you for a long time, and she's very happy you're safe now." Noah absorbed this information silently, his expression unreadable. After a moment, he returned to the puzzle, placing a piece carefully in position. "Will you stay too?" he asked, not looking up. The question caught Jake off guard. In the chaos of the past 2 days, he hadn't considered his own place in Noah's future. He'd taken emergency leave from Thornfield Acres, not that he had any intention of returning to work there, but hadn't thought beyond ensuring Noah's immediate safety. "I'll stay as long as you need me," Jake promised. "Even when you go to live somewhere else, I can still visit if you want." Noah nodded, seemingly satisfied with this answer. They continued working on the puzzle in companionable silence until a soft knock at the door announced a new visitor. Margaret Reynolds entered cautiously, her red hair, now streaked with premature grey, pulled back in a neat ponytail. She wore jeans and a simple blouse, a small leather backpack slung over one shoulder, her eyes the same intense blue as Noah's, immediately filled with tears when she saw him. "Noah," she whispered, stopping just inside the doorway. "Do you remember me? I'm your Aunt Maggie." Noah stared at her, emotions flickering across his face too quickly to read. Then, in a small voice, "You have a cat named Button." Maggie's face transformed with a watery smile. "Yes, I do. He's an old cat now, but he still sleeps on the windowsill and chases strings." Jake stood, giving them space. "I'll step outside for a bit." "No," Noah said quickly, reaching for Jake's hand. "Stay, please." Jake settled back into his chair as Maggie approached slowly, taking the visitor's seat on Noah's other side. The reunion was delicate, fragile with unspoken emotions and careful navigation of the chasm the past 3 years had carved between them. Maggie didn't try to touch Noah or overwhelm him with questions. Instead, she showed him photos on her phone, of Button the cat, of her apartment with its view of a small park, of the elementary school 2 blocks away. "I've missed you so much," she told him simply. "I never stopped looking for you and your mom." Noah studied her face intently. "Mr. Richard said you didn't want us anymore." Maggie's composure cracked briefly, pain flashing across her features. "That wasn't true, sweetheart. I tried to call and visit, but he told me you'd moved away. I even hired someone to look for you, but he..." She swallowed hard. "He was very clever at hiding you." As their conversation continued, Jake observed the subtle similarities between aunt and nephew, not just the striking blue eyes, but certain expressions and mannerisms that spoke of shared genetics. Maggie was careful, respectful of Noah's boundaries, yet radiating genuine love for the child she'd thought lost to her. Late that afternoon, as Noah napped, Jake and Sarah accompanied Maggie to a meeting with hospital administrators, Child Protective Services, and Dr. Morales. The discussion was lengthy and detailed, covering Noah's medical condition, psychological needs, and the legal process ahead. "Recovery will take time," Dr. Morales emphasized. "Noah has experienced prolonged isolation, emotional abuse, and severe neglect during critical developmental years. While he shows remarkable resilience, he'll need specialized trauma therapy, possibly for years to come." Maggie nodded, taking diligent notes. "I've already researched therapists in San Francisco who specialize in childhood trauma, and I've taken family leave from my job to focus on Noah's transition." Her voice wavered slightly. "I just want him to feel safe and loved." "There's something else we need to discuss," Jake interjected. "Noah has formed a strong attachment to a horse at Thornfield Acres, Spirit. This animal apparently visited him during his captivity and ultimately led to his rescue. Noah's asked to see him again." Dr. Morales considered this. "Animal-assisted therapy can be extremely beneficial for trauma survivors. If properly supervised, a reunion with this horse might provide significant emotional support for Noah. The property is still under police control," Sarah added. but I've spoken with Detective Ramirez. They could arrange a brief, supervised visit if medical staff approve. The meeting concluded with a tentative plan. Noah would remain hospitalized for another week while gaining strength and undergoing further evaluation. Maggie would stay nearby, visiting daily to rebuild their relationship. If Noah continued to progress medically, a brief visit to see Spirit would be arranged before his transfer to a specialized pediatric residential treatment facility, where he would receive intensive therapy while Maggie prepared for his eventual placement with her. When Jake returned to Noah's room, the boy was awake, drawing another picture. This one showing Spirit standing beneath a window where a small face peered out through bars. "Is that where you were before the barn?" Jake asked, gently, settling into his chair. Noah nodded. "The old guest house. Mr. Richard said I had to stay there to get better. He said I was sick like Mom." He continued, carefully shading the horse's coat. "But Spirit knew I wasn't sick. He came every day, even when it rained." Jake studied the drawing, noting the detailed architecture of what appeared to be a small inn cottage, partially hidden by trees. "Noah, would you like to see Spirit again? The doctors think it might be possible to visit him soon, if you feel strong enough." Noah's head snapped up, eyes widening with the first genuine excitement Jake had seen from him. "Really? Can we go now?" "Not today," Jake smiled. "Maybe in a few days when you're a little stronger. But we can start planning the visit. Would you like that?" Noah nodded vigorously, adding a final touch to his drawing, a tiny hand reaching through the barred window toward the horse's upturned muzzle. "Spirit saved me," he said, with quiet certainty. "He didn't forget me, even when everyone else did." As Noah continued drawing, Jake watched the careful precision with which the boy depicted his equine friend. The flowing mane, the alert ears, the intelligent eyes. His simple artwork, Noah captured something essential about the horse. Not just physical attributes, but a sense of dignity and purpose that transcended ordinary animal behavior. Through the window, afternoon sunlight streamed into the room, casting a golden rectangle across Noah's bed. The boy paused in his drawing to place his hand deliberately in the warm light, spreading his fingers wide as if to catch the sunshine. His expression for that brief moment was one of pure wonder, a glimpse of the child beneath the trauma, reaching toward healing one small moment at a time. 3 days later, Jake drove slowly along the tree-lined entrance to Thornfield Acres, Noah secured in a booster seat beside him. Aunt Maggie sat in the back, her face tense but composed. Behind them, Detective Ramirez followed in an unmarked police car, while a child psychologist from the hospital rode with them. The farm looked different now. Yellow police tape cordoned off several areas, and officers still conducted searches of outbuildings. The immaculate facade had crumbled, revealing the darkness that had festered beneath its perfect surface. Noah sat utterly still as they approached, his gaze fixed on the passing landscape. Only his hands betrayed his emotions, clutching the wooden horse figure so tightly his knuckles whitened. He wore new clothes, jeans and a blue sweater Maggie had brought, and his hair had been trimmed, no longer hanging in tangled strands around his face. Though still painfully thin, proper nutrition and medication had brought some color back to his cheeks. "Are you okay, buddy?" Jake asked gently as they passed the main house. Noah nodded, though his breathing had quickened. "We can turn around anytime you want," Dr. Ellis, the psychologist, reminded him from the back seat. "Just say the word." "I want to see Spirit," Noah said with quiet determination. They parked near the main stable, where a local veterinarian had been caring for the horses during the investigation. As they rounded the corner of the stable, Noah suddenly stopped, his breath catching. In the paddock ahead, a white horse stood alert, ears pricked forward, sensing their approach. "Spirit," Noah whispered. At the sound of the boy's voice, Spirit's head snapped up, For a moment, horse and child stared at each other across the distance, a connection so palpable everyone present fell silent. Then Spirit moved, trotting along the fence line until he reached the gate closest to them, where he stopped, nickering softly. Together, Jake and Noah approached the paddock gate. When they reached the fence, Spirit extended his head over the top rail, nostrils flaring as he caught Noah's scent. Slowly, Noah raised his hand, palm flat. Spirit lowered his muzzle to the boy's hand, his breath warm against Noah's skin. Then with infinite gentleness, the horse pressed his forehead against Noah's palm in a gesture of unmistakable recognition. "He remembers," Noah whispered, a smile, his first full, genuine smile, transforming his face. The stable manager unlocked the gate, and Jake led Noah into the paddock. To everyone's amazement, Spirit carefully lowered himself to his knees, then to a full resting position on the ground, making himself less intimidating to the small child. Noah settled beside Spirit, leaning gently against the horse's shoulder. Spirit curved his neck around, creating a protective semicircle around Noah. "He used to do this outside my window," Noah explained, his voice stronger than they'd yet heard it. "When it was cold, he'd stand really close so I could feel his warmth through the bars." After nearly an hour with Spirit, Dr. Ellis approached. "Noah, we should think about heading back to the hospital soon. You've had a big day." Noah nodded, though reluctance shadowed his features. He leaned close to Spirit's ear, whispering something only the horse could hear. Then he placed the wooden carving, his constant companion since rescue, on the ground, beside Spirit's front hoof. "He gave this to me to keep me safe," Noah explained to Jake. "Now I'm safe so he can have it back." Jake knelt beside Noah. "That's very thoughtful. But maybe Spirit would want you to keep it as a way to remember him when you go to your new home with Aunt Maggie." Noah considered this, then carefully retrieved the carving. "Can Spirit come too?" Maggie stepped forward. "Noah, I live in an apartment in the city. It's not a place where a horse could live." Noah's face fell, but she continued, "But maybe we could talk about finding a stable near us where Spirit could live, somewhere you could visit him regularly." Hope flickered in Noah's expression. "Really?" Detective Ramirez cleared his throat. "Given the circumstances and Spirit's role in Noah's rescue, I believe we could make a case for transferring ownership to Noah as part of the victim restitution." "We'll do everything we can to make that happen," Jake promised. As they prepared to leave, Noah stood at the paddock gate for one last moment with Spirit. "I'll come back," he whispered. "I promise." 2 weeks later, a ceremony took place at Horizon Hills, the pediatric treatment center where Noah had been transferred. In the center's courtyard, Detective Ramirez presented Noah with official papers. "These say that Spirit belongs to you now, Noah," the detective explained. "He'll be living at Green Meadows Stable, just 15 minutes from your Aunt Maggie's apartment." The following Saturday, Jake waited by the paddock fence at Green Meadows as Noah and Maggie arrived. In the 3 weeks since his rescue, proper nutrition and care had already begun to transform Noah physically. Though still thin, his face had lost its hollow quality, and he walked with growing confidence. At the sound of Noah's voice, Spirit appeared from the stable, head high, white coat gleaming in the California sunshine. Noah broke into a run, not the tentative movement of the traumatized child from the hospital, but the natural enthusiasm of a 7-year-old reunited with a beloved friend. Spirit lowered his head over the fence, and Noah wrapped his arms around the horse's neck in a gesture of complete trust and affection. "I told you I'd come back," Noah murmured against Spirit's neck. The stable had agreed to a unique arrangement. In exchange for Jake's employment as assistant trainer, they provided boarding for Spirit at a reduced rate, covered partially by a victims' compensation fund and partially by a community fundraiser organized after Noah's story made national news. Dr. Ellis had incorporated these stable visits into Noah's treatment plan, recognizing the profound healing effect of his bond with Spirit. Watching Noah lead Spirit around the paddock with Jake's guidance, Maggie could see that healing in action. Her nephew walked taller beside the horse, spoke more freely, smiled more readily. "They found Richard Thornfield in Canada yesterday," Jake told Maggie quietly, ensuring Noah couldn't overhear. "He's being extradited to face charges." "Good. I hope he never sees daylight again," Maggie replied, watching Noah brush Spirit's mane with careful strokes. 1 year later, on a brilliant spring morning, a small gathering assembled at Green Meadows Stable. Friends, therapists, and supporters watched as Noah, now 8, led Spirit into the show ring, the horse's white coat gleaming against the deep green backdrop of California hills. Noah stood taller and stronger, his face filled out and tanned from days spent outdoors. Horse and boy moved in perfect harmony, Spirit responding to the subtlest cues from Noah's hands. When the demonstration ended, applause rippled through the small audience. Noah's face lit with a proud smile, the confident joy of a child who knew himself to be safe, capable, and loved. "Noah's resilience is extraordinary," Jake said to Maggie as they watched. "But so is your dedication to his recovery." It hadn't been an easy road. There had been nightmares, panic attacks, setbacks when certain triggers would send Noah spiraling back into terror. Throughout it all, Spirit had remained his constant, his touchstone. The horse's patient presence provided what humans sometimes couldn't: unconditional acceptance without expectations or judgment. "Spirit and I are going to help other kids," Noah announced later as they shared a picnic. "Jake says when I'm bigger, we can do that program where sick kids come to ride horses." "That sounds wonderful," Maggie said. "You and Spirit would be very good at helping others feel better." Noah nodded solemnly. "Spirit is a good helper. He doesn't talk, but he knows how to listen." As the sun began its descent, Noah walked once more to Spirit's paddock. The boy stood tall beside the fence, no longer the frightened child hiding from the world, but a young person growing steadily toward strength and wholeness. Spirit approached, nickering softly in greeting. Noah reached up to stroke the horse's forehead in the gentle gesture that had become their ritual. For a moment, they stood in silent communion. No words needed between two beings who had seen each other when no one else could. Then Noah turned back toward Maggie and Jake, ready to return to the home and life being carefully reconstructed around him. As they walked toward the car, Noah reached for Maggie's hand with his right, Jake's with his left, connecting them in the simple, perfect triangle of family found rather than born. Behind them, Spirit watched from the paddock fence, his white coat catching the day's final light, a sentinel still bearing witness to the journey from darkness to dawn, from silence to voice, from isolation to belonging. The horse would be there tomorrow and all the tomorrows after, a living reminder that sometimes salvation comes not in dramatic rescues, but in the steady presence of one being who refuses to look away, who sees beyond barriers, who hears what others cannot. And high above, the vast sky stretched endlessly onward, the same sky that had once seemed an impossible dream viewed through barred windows, now an everyday miracle, wide open with promise, limitless as hope itself. Dear listeners, we hope that the story of Noah and Spirit has touched your hearts. If you want to continue being moved by stories like this one, subscribe to the channel, leave your like, and share in the comments what moved you the most. Here, each story is a reminder that love can overcome even the deepest darkness.